Good Tuesday afternoon to you. 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Owners with a special league meeting to approve the sale of the Broncos in Minneapolis, and they in fact did unanimously. Also some news coming out of that relative to the Deshaun Watson case. So Chris Sims, Mike Florio on Pro Football Talk on what they are hearing relative to the appeal of the 6-game suspension for Deshaun Watson by the NFL.
I just wonder, is it going to be the full year, or is it going to be in that 10 to 12 range? I think that's where at least I feel I'm sitting at right now, and it seems to be a lot of the thoughts when you talk to some people around the league that it's somewhere in that ballpark. So
12 is the kind of loose, like the same way 6 was the kind of loose number.
Yeah.
That I had floating around before Judge Robinson suspended him. 6, 12 is kind of, but there's still that part of me that says the league wants 17. The league's getting 17.
Yeah.
They want to go to court over it. They go to court over it. Maybe they're thinking if we back off to 12, they won't. They won't go through the whole effort to try to race to the courthouse if it's just 12. But maybe 12 and a huge fine to take away some of the money he made last year.
Again, Mike Florio talking about what he's hearing relative to the Deshaun Watson suspension. All right, Drew Rosenhaus, an agent on the new process of the NFL's discipline that was bargained collectively. Now, Rosenhaus represents or has represented Antonio Brown, Chad Johnson, Rob Gronkowski, Plexico Burress, Tyreek Hill. So one thing he knows about is players getting disciplined by the NFL. Here's Drew Rosenhaus on the new system.
Let's go to Deshaun Watson. The NFL and the Players Association jointly hiring Judge Sue L. Robinson to preside over the case. She determined a 6-game suspension, but now the league is appealing that decision. Drew, this is a new way to look at a code of conduct violation. Is this the right way to go about it?
No, I think anybody that looks at this fairly would say that you've got a union and you've got management, and you both appointed Sue Robinson, who's a neutral judge or arbitrator. Why not respect her decision? I think it's ridiculous that the NFL this is a sham of the system. If you have a neutral arbitrator who's very qualified, 20-something years of experience, and you basically sweep that under the rug and you bring in someone that's really just a shill for the NFL, and they're just going to increase the suspension. What's the point of having these appeals if you're not going to respect a neutral process? I think the NFL has got to change this system. It's not fair to the players. It's not fair to the union. And I don't think it's right.
Again, that's Drew Rosenhaus, agent on the collectively bargained process that is now in place. All right. Mike Lombardi, former Browns executive, gives some insight about the Browns' thinking relative to going out and getting Deshaun Watson.
When I worked there, it was all about trying to find a quarterback. I got 1 year to do it and then got fired. But that's where Jimmy Haslam has been on that path to find a quarterback, which is shocking because they're acquiring a quarterback that they traded away from. People don't realize they had the 12th pick in the draft. They're the team that traded that pick to Houston, so Houston could acquire Deshaun Watson. So now they recircle back because the past regime, I think it was Sashi Brown and all that, they didn't think Watson analytically matched up to what they wanted, so they traded the pick.
Your gut, though, is this going to be a year you think that's what the NFL is looking for?
I think it'll be a year where it'll be, if the NFL has to settle, I think they settle on 12 weeks. That's just, and I'm just guessing. But if the NFL wanted to let this die, they could have let it die at Sue Robinson's feet. Obviously, they want to bring more authority to this offense. And clearly, what she writes in her summary, it was egregious.
Again, Mike Lombardi about the decision and kind of relative to his thoughts with the NFL. Special league meetings going on in Minneapolis, as we mentioned at the top, to approve the Broncos as the new ownership group of the Broncos, the Walton family, Waltons. It was approved unanimously. Here is what some of the things relative to Deshaun Watson coming out of those league meetings. Pro Football Talk tweets, Jimmy Haslam says Browns will respect and honor the process and live by the decision. Longtime NFL reporter Ed Werder Take a listen to this. One owner told him Watson's penalty was, quote, too lenient. When asked, another said there needs to be, quote, more of everything, end quote. Again, Ed Werder, with a couple of owners tweeting. Now, also, Aaron Wilson, another NFL national reporter, says his sources say the NFLPA wants Peter Harvey to have a hearing for the appeal. There's no indication yet if Harvey will do that. He is not required to do that because there's no new evidence that can be presented, but it would allow oral presentations to Peter C. Harvey relative to the suspension and adding on to it. All right, with that, let us welcome in Tim Bielik. Tim, a lot going on. It's kind of interesting. If you have oral arguments, it's just going to drag the process out a little bit more. It's not going to change anything relative to any suspension add-on, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, the hay's kind of in the barn when it comes to whatever, evidence is in front of Peter C. Harvey, the designee for Roger Goodell, to make his decision. And it's got to be based on, obviously, the findings by Judge Robinson. Those are the ones that have to be part of the appeal. And the evidence says, based on her findings, that Deshaun Watson was guilty of violating the personal conduct policy in those three different facets that we've talked about in the past. So obviously, he's going to get suspended. You have to assume it's going to be longer. You have to assume that there's going to be a fine involved, possibly massive fine, $10 million, maybe more, depending on what Harvey and the NFL decides to levy. It's going to be his decision, though. And I know there's connections to the NFL. He's not directly connected to the NFL, but he has worked with them in the past, so you can understand why Roger Goodell appointed him to the designee. When I look at suspension length, it's tough where you kind of want this to land if you're the Browns, because if it's 12 games, then, you'll still get him for a few games. You get him to knock some rust off, get him ready for 2023. And who knows, maybe Jacoby Brissett suddenly has you in good position. Maybe they're somehow 7-5 when Deshaun Watson comes back on the 12-game suspension. The downside of that, of course, is Deshaun Watson's contract tolls over, and then you're looking at that base salary skyrocketing to about $45 or so million for next season. 17 games. If it's the full season suspension, then obviously 2022 becomes kind of a waste. There's obviously the negative that you waste the prime of several of your key players: Nick Chubb, Myles Garrett, Denzel Ward, what have you. But if you're the Browns, then it's not completely bad, because if Watson suspended the entire season, that contract pushes back a year. So all of a sudden, the 2023 base salary is only the $1 million. So all of a sudden, the potential cap crunch that would have come, from next season when all these contracts enter their second season, that goes away. And then you still have your $40+ million in salary cap rollover in 2023, where you don't have to worry about those contracts, maybe even loading up even more if you so choose, especially if you expect the salary cap to go up. I mean, none of us know what's going to happen, but I think you have to look at it with some perspective and with the understanding that the NFL that Peter C. Harvey is probably going to levy a heavier suspension. Who knows whether we see this in court or not, but all we know is that this is far from over.
Yeah, and again, Peter C. Harvey is the legal arm, the lawyer, if you will, who helped Roger Goodell craft the code of conduct that Deshaun Watson was found violating. So that suspension, he knows what the NFL intended, and that suspension's going up. There's no other way about it. All right, let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about the whole Roger Goodell decision and relative to the owners as well.
Calling out of Cleveland, Ohio. Just want to speak on the owners. I don't understand how Washington admitted everything that they did, and the owner of the NFL won't go after the owner of Washington. And Deshaun Watson is allegation. Even the judge, a civil judge for 25 years, 2 indictments got throughout. People need to understand the significance of indictment. You don't just get out of indictment, especially in Texas. With that being said, carry on.
All right, as always, appreciate all the voicemails. And again, the NFL, my guess is going to try to address its lenience with owners in the upcoming months, years, and the like, because it has been pointed out in this case that they haven't been. And I think you're starting to see that with the way they dealt with Stephen Ross, the owner of the Dolphins.
Yeah, I think that's got to be step number one, obviously, is what they did with Stephen Ross, suspending him almost the same amount of time as Deshaun Watson's initial suspension was. I think it ends the day after Deshaun Watson's six-game suspension that was originally issued to him was expected to end. So that's step one in the process. We know from the CBA and all the things that have come on the past few months that owners are supposed to be held to a higher standard than players. Obviously, that hasn't happened to this point, and that would be, if this goes to court, an argument that, the NFL players could possibly make is, well, why these owners did all these different things, and why all of a sudden do they get nothing, but Deshaun Watson gets a massive, massive suspension? I'm not trying to downplay anything Deshaun Watson was accused of and sued up in civil court. I'm not downplaying that by any stretch, but if you're talking in the issue of fairness, at some point that has to come into play right there. And it comes down to potentially arbitrary decision making by the NFL, and you have to uphold a standard of no one is above the rule of the NFL. That if you violate the code, no matter who you are, there should be some sort of punishment involved. It doesn't matter if you're a third stringer on the practice squad or if you're an owner, one of the 5 richest owners in the NFL, for example. Everybody's got to be held accountable.
Yeah, and again, that is likely to be the part of the appeal in federal court if the Players Association decides to do that when Peter Harvey announces what the suspension will be. All right, Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com, and I can step aside to quick timeout. Other side of the break, we head to training camp. Some injury news that is not sounding good. We'll be right back. More Sports for CLE. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
Maybe cliche, but there's no I in team. The only identity that matters is we. The collective effort to love thy neighbor is needed now more than ever. The responsibility behind pronouns such as I, me, and mine impact we, us, and ours. So understand that you make all the difference in the team. He, him, her, or she can't disturb our peace, since we control our destiny as student athletes. This is the power of pronouns.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to OhioLottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns here on Sports4CLE. Browns back on the field after a Players' Day off out in Berea, and some not so good news. Jakeem Grant, the guy that the Browns were counting on to really give a boost to the return game, gets carted off. The fear, and I repeat, the fear is that he has a torn Achilles. That would be a horrible break for the Browns. Grant probably going to factor into the wide receiving room in addition to being one of the league's top return men. But the fear right now, according to multiple reports, is that he may have a torn Achilles. When we look at some action on the camp, so Deshaun Watson going to work, and here he finds Kareem Hunt. So Hunt back in the team drills, working out. Again, Deshaun Watson from his own end zone going to find Amari Cooper. And a nice catch there by Cooper. And again, more Deshaun Watson. And this time, pretty good defense is coming in to get the interception is John Johnson III. So John Johnson having a good camp as well. You see the ball hawking ability. And Jedrick Wills is a guy that Browns really need to kind of get right and get going. Banged up all last year. He talked about having Joe Thomas, who will likely be a first ballot Hall of Famer left tackle, working with him in the offensive line the last few days of training camp.
It's been really good. He's been coming down and helping us. Been here during camp almost every day. Him and Coach Callahan have kind of built in like a little session where he can come in and show us a couple things from his day and work on some technique with us. So it's been very beneficial.
Jed, do you feel like you got that ankle injury that first game last year? Did it just hold you back a lot last season, or how did that unwind?
Yeah, I would say through the first probably 3 to 4 weeks until I got that 2 game off, I was only like 50%. And playing offensive line, it was just wasn't anything helpful at all.
All right, Jedrick Wills talking about not only Joe Thomas, but then kind of being banged up most of last year. Tim, they need Jedrick Wills to be the left tackle they thought he was when they took him 10 overall to be successful.
No question, especially if Deshaun Watson misses most, if not all of the season, like we kind of expect to happen. Obviously, he struggled last year. I think the injuries played a huge role in that. Obviously, gutting it out the way he did is commendable. It shows he's got a lot of toughness, but, you know, it really hurt the team because he wasn't 100% at a time where really, you know, all parts of the offense were kind of breaking down a year ago. So the big thing for him is he needs to be healthy. And if he is, I think he's got a good shot to have a very good year. I don't know if he's a guy that's going to make a lot of Pro Bowls, but certainly has the ability to at least be a quality starter on the offensive line. In some cases, that's all you really need. You just need him to be good, kind of live up to that 10th pick status that the Browns drafted him for a couple years ago. He's still a young guy, only his 3rd season in the league, still in his early 20s, so he still has a lot of time to grow. But it seems like he's put in a lot more work this offseason, working hard with Joe Thomas. I mean, if you're going to learn from anybody in the NFL about how to be a good left tackle, you call Joe Thomas. He's more than willing to help, and he's been there and can only be a positive, not just for him, but for all the offensive linemen. And,
you know, the wide receiver room, if something you want to avoid over at training camp, because it's been banged up. Unfortunately, Grant looks more serious, and that would be a blow to what the Browns expected to be a much improved return game.
Absolutely. I mean, this is devastating, I think, for the kick return game. No other way to put it, because Jakeem Grant was far and away the guy that you would have expected to be the main kick and punt returner. I mean, that's what the Browns signed him for, is to be a difference maker on special teams. Now that if indeed it's the Achilles he's gone, then you, of course, the worst of all the injuries we've seen it. A receiver room that's been ravaged by them throughout training camp. David Bell has missed time. Amari Cooper has missed time. Anthony Schwartz has missed time. Michael Woods is going to miss more time after having a good first few days of practice. But Jakeem Grant, obviously, if he's out for the season, that's massive. I know you still have a couple in-house options. Maybe Anthony Schwartz or Dearness Johnson steps into those roles. Maybe Demetric Felton gets in there, but none of them are as dynamic as Jakeem Grant was expected to be. And especially if Deshaun Watson doesn't play this season, you need having that dynamic returner to shorten the field. It's a huge bonus if you have it, and to make the offense have to do less to go down the field. So, I mean, you can't understate the potential impact that this injury could have. Yeah, it's a tough one. So hopefully, again, nothing official. The fear is it's a torn Achilles, though. All right, Ryan Clark talks about something that the Browns are going to need if they're going to be successful. That 1-2 punch in the backfield running the football.
I think it's hard to not say it's the Cleveland Browns. We have to think about who Kareem Hunt was before he became a Cleveland Brown. In Kansas City, he was one of the top rushers in the NFL. He was a guy who was a Pro Bowler, and obviously he had his off-the-field issues, which set him back, which is how he ended up in Cleveland. And also Nick Chubb. To me, Nick Chubb is a top 2 or 3 running back in this league. There's power, there's speed, there's burst, there's finish. And so I think when you have that sort of 1-2 punch, also with the pass, with the run blocking, that the Cleveland Browns possess, you have to put those guys at number one. I think you can also mention guys like Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. I think now as they start to continue to play, as A.J. Dillon finds a place in that offense in the power running game, that's also a duo to me that you have to look to and say, okay, they could be ascending and they could be one of those duos that becomes mentioned with the Kareem Hunts and the Nick Chubb. But for right now, I believe that duo as two players, having that elite rusher in Nick Chubb, that all-pro caliber rusher, and also a Pro Bowl-like player in Kareem Hunt, I don't believe there's another team in the NFL that possesses that 1-2 punch.
All right, Tim, we're going to take it a step further. CBS Sports top 10 NFL running back rotations. So they're going to say Chubb, Hunt, and Robinson. Dearness Johnson are number one in the NFL. And that's kind of interesting, and it's one of the reasons that Andrew Berry does not want to trade Kareem Hunt. Close call with the Colts, but the Browns have done serious damage when given RB1 duties to either of the three. It's a nice luxury to have, especially, Tim, if you're thinking you're not going to have your starting quarterback for a significant portion of the season.
Definitely. I mean, we know that, if Jacoby Brissett's the guy, the Browns are going to probably run much more than they have in the past, which I'm sure will, make some people happy. The fans that are always shouting at, the Browns or whatever to run the ball, they're probably going to get plenty of it this year. And with the way the rotation's set up, it's going to be important for them to kind of continue to spread the wealth around so that Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt don't get worn down with carries, because we've seen both of them be affected by injuries the past couple seasons. They're going to ultimately need both those guys, and they're both incredible talents. I mean, we see Nick Chubb's got the complete package as far as speed, power. He knows how to find the hole and get up top speed. We see him just go for big runs. He's tough to bring down off first contact. And Kareem Hunt, very good in the run game and also a very effective receiver when he gets the football in his hands. I mean, we saw in the Bears game a year ago just a lot of the tools that he has. I mean, it's easy to forget how good he was in Kansas City, considering, he's kind of the number 2 back in this room behind Nick Chubb. And of course, it's also easy to forget Dearness Johnson and what he did when both Hunt and Chubb were out in that game against the Broncos. He didn't have a lot of big runs, but he had a lot of good runs and really kept the ball moving, kept the chains moving in a game where, the Browns had to start Case Keenum and just were not able to do as much through the air. Maybe it's a similar situation with Jacoby Brissett at quarterback. And if that is the case for 12 or 17 games or however long this is, those 3 guys are going to need to be tremendous if the Browns are going to go places. Tim
Bielik from the Plain Dealer, as well as cleveland.com, and I'm going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, will the Browns take a look at Jimmy Garoppolo as a solution? Sports4CLE, be right back.
Come back to Go Forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
We continue talking Browns here on Sports4CLE. So if Deshaun Watson is indeed suspended 10, 12, 17 games, question becomes, should the Browns pursue Jimmy Garoppolo? Emmanuel Acho from FS1's Speak for Yourself has this opinion.
We got to talk about the Cleveland Browns. We know Deshaun Watson, he has a looming suspension. Besides Deshaun Watson, Jacoby Brissett, he ain't started in 9 months. Only 5 starts last year for Joy's other team, the Miami Dolphins. So now Jimmy G with the Browns. Ugh, frigid cold. These are freezing cold temperatures for your boy. Joy, where do you stand?
Yeah, I'm cold on this as well. I don't think this is a good fit. It feels really desperate, although that's usually how the Browns do feel. So now that I talk through, maybe. But I don't think this is a good spot for Jimmy Garoppolo. It's not a good division for a guy that has been injured a lot, to Bucky's point. They've already got enough going on there with the quarterback situation. I don't think it works for anybody.
Yeah, I agree with both of you guys. I don't think it works. I'm really cold on it to make sure my Ebonics are correct this time. I'm cold on this situation. I don't like Jimmy Garoppolo going there. I think the Browns are okay with Jacoby Brissett already in tow.
So, Tim Bielik, what are your thoughts? If it is, say, 12 games, is it Jacoby Brissett or Jimmy Garoppolo if you can get him at a reasonable price?
Well, I mean, it's a difficult question because with Jimmy Garoppolo, you're not just looking at the talent. I mean, the talent's obvious. When you look at just them as pure football players, I think anybody would rather take Jimmy Garoppolo over Jacoby Brissett. I think that's pretty obvious when it comes to talent, but talent doesn't just play the equation. You mentioned the cap hit. I mean, it's a massive cap hit Jimmy Garoppolo has, and if the Niners are going to move him, then, they would have to eat a ton of that cap just to get him off the books. I know there may be leverage if Deshaun Watson's suspension is pushed to 17 games or whatever, but we saw how much that leverage meant for the Browns and Baker Mayfield. They got a late round pick for him in 2024, not even 2023 pick, to eat most of the cap just to move him. So there's that issue. And then, of course, coming off shoulder surgery, I think, he hasn't thrown much in training camp. He's the 4th string quarterback right now in Niners camp. They just put out that unofficial depth chart. He's going to be on the move. Obviously, it's just a question of where. I think if you're the Browns and it's a full season and you really think that maybe trying to make a playoff push with this team for one season might be the best thing. Give the Niners a call and see what it would take to make Jimmy Garoppolo happen. I mean, it wouldn't be too much of a crazy transition, I think, going from a Kyle Shanahan offense to a Kevin Stefanski offense, because the blocking schemes are so extremely similar. Again, there's more than pure talent in there, but if it's a full season, I would probably lean towards Garoppolo. If it's 12, I would probably go Jacoby.
Fair enough. The one thing to keep an eye on is his big contract is not guaranteed. It's 20-some million, but the thought is he may be released by the 49ers. If that happens, he can pick where he goes. We'll see if it is, in fact, the Browns. You would think, it's a one-year marriage of convenience, and this team's pretty talented. But again, can't really restructure the deal because of how it's laid out. He would have to be released. So we'll see how that goes. All right. Bleacher Report on how the Browns should proceed following Kareem Hunt's request of a trade. And the way they say it is a trade could still be the best long-term play. Where could he end up? Atlanta Falcons. Cordell Patterson isn't an every down ball carrier. That's very true. Los Angeles Rams. They do have Cam Akers, so that's kind of interesting. Young guy who, when he stayed healthy, has been okay. Chicago Bears is another one that they point to. You see Montgomery and Herbert. And then they say why a trade probably won't happen before week 1. And they're saying if Hunt isn't fully healthy, his value won't peak until closer to the trade deadline. I think Hunt's pretty healthy. I don't know that any of those make a lot of sense. I don't think any of them are necessarily ready to contend. So why would you go out and get a big time quarterback or running back?
Yeah, the only way that would happen, I think, is if one of those of a starting back somewhere is a big injury, and then all of a sudden, especially a playoff contender who's looking for an upgrade. I'm sure the Browns would probably prefer it to be in the NFC than the AFC for obvious reasons. But I feel like the best thing to do, obviously, keep Kareem Hunt. Maybe see if you get him a couple extra $1 million or something like that, if possible. and play the season out and see what happens next year. Again, we talked about the cap crunch that's going to happen with this team. Can't pay everybody, and probably isn't good business, as good as Kareem Hunt is, to keep a number 2 running back around for a while when you have Dearness Johnson and Jerome Ford still kind of waiting around. They're going to need turns, and we also don't know Dearness Johnson's future. I'd be willing to believe at least one of those guys won't be back in 2023. So the question, I guess it comes down to, the Browns just want to play it out, let Kareem Hunt show what he can do again this season. And if the Browns aren't able to keep him and he goes sign somewhere for decent money, you do get a compensatory pick out of it, as long as you don't go and sign someone of equal or similar value in the offseason, which again, with Dearness Johnson and Jerome Ford, I don't see that happening. But best thing I think for everybody is if Kareem Hunt just sticks around and you don't trade him unless somebody gives you an offer you can't refuse.
All right, so a team that has wide receivers available is willing to trade them is the Miami Dolphins. So this is from CBS Sports. Dolphins have had trade talks about wide receivers Preston Williams and Lynn Bowden Jr. Preston Williams has returned kicks back in 2019 in the NFL. Bowden, who is from Warren Harding High School, was a very good kick returner at Kentucky and punt returner. It depends on what the price is, but either of those guys necessarily intrigue you?
Not really, no. I mean, neither guy's really done much in the NFL. We know Lynn Bowden was part of that, ill-fated Raiders draft in 2020. That might go down as one of the worst drafts of all time. He doesn't even play a game for the Raiders. Pretty much gets moved right away to Miami. Had a solid season. I'm looking at the numbers: 28 catches, 211 yards. Solid numbers, but didn't play last year. And then you look at Preston Williams, 3 years in the NFL, only about 56 catches for 787 yards, 7 touchdowns in 24 games. So not a lot of production for Preston Williams. Maybe if you're looking for a guy to fill out the bottom of the depth chart, as a backup receiver, as an insurance policy in case another guy gets injured. And I mean, considering the injuries that have happened in that receiver room throughout training camp, it's something worth visiting. But, again, there's just not a lot there with those two guys, I think.
Yeah, and you're going to have probably better people available come 53-man cutdown day when teams have to make those roster decisions. Tim Bielik and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, the Browns are picking what midfield will look like. We'll hear what the players want. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
So the Cleveland Browns have a voting contest going on. What do you want to see at the 50-yard line, midfield, during this season at First Energy Stadium? They're letting fans vote on it earlier. Over the weekend, Browns players got to cast their votes, and the Browns show us how they decided to vote.
Which field design do you want to see this season? Bottom right. Bottom right. Meanwhile, top right. Let's go old school, brown in the middle with the orange end zone. Man, put a dog in the middle of that bit, man. Put a roof in the middle. Leave that elf where it's at. Roof. Leave that elf where we dogs. We put a dog. Nothing less. The dog under the bed, man.
I like an intimidating brown and yellow, so I'm gonna go with the top right.
We want the brown and the one that look like mine. Top right.
So there it is. The players want the running brownie elf, but you got to like the defensive backs, Tim. Grant Delpit, Greedy Williams, Hanford Dixon, and Frank Minifield. The originators of the dog pound would be proud. They want a dog in the middle.
Yeah, how has it been almost 40 years since Hanford Dixon and Frank Minifield coined the term dog pound, and the Browns haven't created, a long-standing logo of a dog? I mean, that seems like perfect sense if you wanted to capitalize on that idea from all the way back. But I do think that those are some interesting designs. I think that you're looking at with the fields. I do like a lot of the players are interested, at least in the idea of having Brownie the elf be the midfield logo. Obviously, there's a lot of fans that like it. It's a throwback to the classic days. And, Cleveland, in a lot of ways, is a throwback city. They like the old school stuff. And I think a lot of people were happy when the older style jerseys came back in 2020. So no surprise that, that would be the interesting logo. I think it's more of a thing, though, that Browns fans would get more than other fans. I think other fans would look at Brownie the elf being in midfield like, well, why is there an elf in the middle of the field? Aren't you guys the Cleveland Browns? What does that have to do with an elf? I think it's obviously more of a Cleveland thing, but I think Browns fans should at least be happy that some of the players, they're on Team Brownie the Elf there.
I'm a big Brownie the Elf fan, always have been, so I'm with them. Either one of them that they decide I like. I'm not as big a fan about the orange helmet, but that's all right. All right, Dog Pound Daily. 5 indicators of a successful season for the Browns. We're going to break them up 2 and 3. So number 5, running game has a big season. And that's going to be particularly important because Deshaun Watson's going to miss some time. We'll find out how much. Number 4, Amari Cooper has one of his career best seasons. And, Tim, when you talk about those two together, those are going to be Amari Cooper, the running game, are going to have to elevate whomever the quarterback is, at least in the initial, how many ever games of the season.
Definitely. And what we know about Amari Cooper is he's a legitimate number 1 receiver. He's not the best of the number 1 receivers, but he's worthy of being considered number 1. I mean, again, I've talked about how his strength is his agility, just his ability to get open. He's got very good hands, and I think that plays well for any quarterback. And especially if you're looking for Jacoby Brissett to start a bunch, if not all of the games in 2022, you want to get guys around that are going to get open and make decisions easier for your quarterback. And, David Bell, to an extent, is kind of the same way, but Amari Cooper's been productive in the NFL. I think if he has a big season, especially if the Browns do a lot more play action in 2022 based off this run game, then I think Cooper has a good year. And going back to the run game, I think that's kind of paramount no matter who the quarterback was. If Deshaun Watson was quarterback for 17 games, then, maybe it's not as important because then all of a sudden the Browns have an elite quarterback and maybe it's more of a passing offense. But, if it's not the case, then it becomes more like 2020, 2021, where you're leaning on those 2, if not those 3 running backs to be productive and to continue to get yards, even if you're going up against 8 or even 9-man boxes. When they know the run's coming, you have to be able to get something done when the opponent knows the run's coming. And if you can do that and they still can't stop it, then you're doing something right with the run game. That the Browns have the backs to do it, but they just got to go out and do it, especially depending on how they want to defend against Jacoby Brissett. All
right, relative to that, so the top 3, number 3, O-line returns to form. That one's going to be huge without question. Number 2, top-ranked defense, and they will need that. And the top indicator that it was a successful season for the Browns, they returned to the playoffs. And again, even with Jacoby Brissett as the quarterback, they're a team that should be fighting for the playoffs. This roster is good enough.
Yeah, I mean, they're one of the most talented rosters in football. And I know the division is supposed to be very tough. The AFC is supposed to be very tough, but we do understand, you do also have to understand that, not everything in the NFL goes according to plan. I mean, how many teams have been coming into a season expecting to be tremendous, and then they completely fall apart for one reason or another? I mean, look at the Ravens last season. They were expected to, compete for the division, possibly compete for a Super Bowl, and they got devastated by injuries to the point where their defense couldn't compete anymore. It was that devastated by injuries. That, who knows, that's going to happen to a team or two this season. The question is when. But if you're the Browns, if the quarterback's not going to be the guy, if he's not an elite guy, then you need the rest of the pieces to play well. And certainly they can. I mean, we've seen when this offensive line is healthy, they are effective. They can give the quarterback time. They can open running lanes, especially, if tackles are healthy and Nick Harris steps in and becomes, and there's very little, if any, drop-off between him and J.C. Tretter from a year ago. This defense certainly has the ability to get better. We saw that John Johnson interception of Deshaun Watson. If he plays like he's capable of, like he's showed he could do with the Rams, Grant Delpit continues to come along. We see Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah really break out and, show more potential and more consistency going to his second season. Certainly all the reasons the Browns could be a top 5 defense. They have all those ingredients. It's just a matter of going on doing it and trying to elevate your quarterback. It's not an easy thing to do, but if there's a team that can do it, the Browns certainly are one of those teams that you think has that potential if need be.
All right, and another guy that's going to be key to that along the defensive line, rookie Perrin Winfrey. Today, talked to the media and was asked about how Myles Garrett is helping him adjust to the NFL.
It's crazy just to be able to be around a guy like that and just to see his movements and how fluid he is on the field. It's a blessing to be able to play with him.
What kind of tips is he giving you?
A lot of tips, mostly on using my hands better, being able to strike. And I would say he's giving me a lot of tips, but mostly I'm watching him 24/7, so that's a tip in itself. Right. Coach just tells me to be a consistent football player every day, and everything else is going to work out for itself. So just coming in every day and making sure that I'm doing the work that I need to do on and off the field, and the Lord going to take care of the rest.
And, Tim, that's a guy I'm anxious to see, even in the preseason games. I get the feeling he's going to get after it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, this was a guy who was expected to be a second-round pick out of the draft, and for him to slide to fourth, I'm sure, we all remember that Zoom call he had right after he got drafted, the energy he has. I'm sure he's, got that chip on his shoulder trying to show people, why he should have been a day 2 pick instead of, one of the first guys off the board in day 3. And I think with rookies, anywhere, especially in the NFL, the best thing you could do is be a sponge and learn from the guys around you. Myles Garrett is a pretty good guy to learn from, because he doesn't just do it with athleticism. He's been around the league enough where he's had to develop moves, and he's developed those things. And we know Myles Garrett is capable of being a defensive player of the year. So when you're a young player on that defensive front, you better be learning as much you can from 95. And it seems like Perrin Winfrey's doing that. And if he continues to do that, and continue to develop, I'm fascinated to see what he does in preseason. I think he can be effective and work his way into some rotation time this season.
Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, as well as cleveland.com. As always, Tim, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Have a good day.
All right, Tim Bielik, make sure you read on pages of the Plain Dealer, as well as cleveland.com. We're going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we'll hear more from Perrin Winfrey, take a look at some position battles going on in training camp. Sports4CLE, be right back.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams, I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns here on Sports4CLE. So at Oklahoma, Perrin Winfrey kind of played out of position, played more of a nose tackle, gets to the Senior Bowl, plays more of a tackle in a 4-3 and impresses. He talked about how the Browns are using him more as that 4-3 tackle and just how his adaptedness, how he's adapting to that new role.
It's an adjustment, but it's an adjustment that I like. I feel good right now. Like in college, you feel like a little banged up before the season. This is the best my body ever felt. So it's a blessing to have Coach Stefanski and the way that he takes care of us.
So you're looking forward to turning
turning the heat on Friday, most definitely. I can't wait to be able to hit somebody for real, for sure.
And what do you think of? Can you gauge where you're at as far as starting role by the time we get to September? Where you're at right now? Or?
I like where I'm at a consistency level, and I just leave that to coach. Whoever he feels like is the man for the job, then that's his job. Like my only job is to try to perform and do what the team needs me to do. Other than that, I'm just gonna leave everything up to the man in charge.
Perrin, you've become a real fan favorite. The dog stuff with the draft.
Right.
Have you been feeling it from the fans?
Oh yeah, most definitely. The fans are going crazy. Even still to this day, I love it here.
All right, a wise rookie, never looking to create any issues. Let's welcome in Spencer German, 92.3 The Fan. Spencer, he answered that like a wily veteran. Going to leave it up to the coaches. I'm playing consistent.
Yeah, I think he's saying all the right things, right? Especially as a rookie coming in, just trying to be a sponge, if you will, and just absorb everything he can and try to play in that role that he's given. So I think there's a lot of fans out there, and I guess same as us guys who cover the team, who have a lot of high hopes for Perrin Winfrey. I think he's going to have to shoulder maybe a lot in terms of pressure from the fan base, because I think there's some questions right now about those interior defensive tackle positions, and he's definitely going to get rotated in there. So I'm certainly excited to see what he can do. If he plays with the same energy that he brought when he came in for his introductory press conference and on draft night when he was fired up, then I think he could have certainly a very successful career, specifically here in Cleveland.
All right, so ESPN had training camp battles to watch for the Browns. It's that defensive tackle. And you see Brian, Sheldon Day, Jordan Elliott, Togiai, Perrin Winfrey. You know what? Here's the thing. All those guys are going to be put out there. Go and earn a spot, because you have the ability to start carving out a career if you're one of those guys.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right about that. I think Taven Bryan, has the most experience of the group, coming from Jacksonville. So certainly feel like he could be a steady presence there. But I think across the board, like really in today's day and age in the NFL, we see a lot of coaches who rotate those defensive tackle and defensive line positions in general, unless you have almost that Myles Garrett-like player who you want out there almost every single snap. There's a lot of rotating going on. So I think all those guys are going to get a shot. All those guys are going to have a chance to play in some capacity throughout the season. And to your point, Dave, like who steps up, who kind of shows on the tape, who is able to make some plays, maybe ends up being the guy who gets more involved in the rotation. But I still think right now, fans and us alike are kind of looking at that group, that position group specifically. We do have some questions. We want to know what we're going to get out of that group, what we're going to see from that group. It's maybe one of the weaker spots on this team, maybe the weakest spot on the defense, because I think there's some potential for obviously the edge rushers with Miles and Clowney back together. Obviously the middle of that group, you think you have high hopes for JOK. And on the back end, I think the secondary certainly is one of the strongest suits of this team. So that's an area you're looking at with some questions, and you just hope that somebody, whether it's Perrin Winfrey, whether it's Tommy Togiai coming along, whether it's Jordan Elliott maybe finally blossoming a little bit more. I think people are kind of hoping somebody of that group kind of shows well and takes the reins there and is able to earn that spot.
Yeah, they're definitely going to need to. This is also kind of interesting. So CBS Sports, must-watch rookies in the preseason, and this is across the NFL. They say Alex Wright, edge rusher from the Browns, kind of interesting, just UAB, so wasn't a big profile guy. 6'5", 271. Keep an eye on him. That's and the other thing that they said about Wright when he was drafted, had trouble setting the edge. Who's one of the best guys at setting the edge as a defensive end in the NFL? It's Jadeveon Clowney. So you can be sure the young fella is getting a master class in that weakness from Clowney.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think Alex Wright's in a great spot because of the guys ahead of him that you mentioned. Clowney, you got Garrett in front of him. That's a position group that you come into kind of different than Perrin Winfrey, who's going to see some time, and that we're kind of, I think, all looking for somebody to kind of stand out there. He has a chance to just kind of come in, no pressure, just sit back, learn from two of the best in the game that have done it, and, insert yourself where needed when you get reps and make some plays. So he's got some great minds to pick in front of him. He's got no pressure really coming in. I think there's a chance that he can certainly perform at a high level in spurts and put some nice things on tape out there that have Browns fans encouraged for the future of that position as well.
All right, this is also from Dog Pound Daily. 3 players who have gone missing during training camp so far. Number 3, linebacker Sione Takitaki. Number 2, tight end David Njoku. They delineate the big 4-year, $54 and $750 million contract. And number 1, defensive tackle Taven Bryant. Now, Spencer, the one thing I'll say, they've only been in pads, a little over a week. Not a lot to see. How many times have we seen guys that shine in camp don't perform in the games? But you want to be pretty consistent.
Yeah, I think Taven Bryan, one of the things I would say for him is just if a defensive tackle isn't being noticed, sometimes that's a good thing, right? Like we say that in games all the time. Those guys do a lot of the dirty work where you're forcing plays to different guys to make the play. You're not always the guy who's making the play, but you kind of do some things, disrupt some things that then allow the next level or your defensive ends to maybe converge and make the play. So, I can't speak specifically because I'm not out there at camp every day seeing what he's doing. But I don't know that that's necessarily the end of the world. I will say David Njoku being on the list is definitely a concern because I think everybody has high expectations for him after he signed the contract that put him up in the top 5 in terms of tight end contracts and the value of his deal that he got. So I think there's certainly some questions about, is he worth that price tag? Is he going to perform up to the figures that he got? And that obviously remains to be seen. So people are expecting big things from him. But I would caution at this time of year, it's never good one way or another to overreact, right? We saw it last year. We see it every year. There's always a player that seems to stand out, and then you get to the season and they don't perform or live up to the hype that they had during training camp. So you can't overhype a guy, and you can't underhype a guy during training camp. You just got to kind of let him get to there's some concern.
Yeah, and the way it's structured now, there isn't as many sessions in training camp, and they're trying to protect everybody. So it's really hard to get a true read. And heck, even the preseason games, it's tough because there's 3 of them and they don't play the starters a lot. Spencer German and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out on the side of the break. We'll hear more from Jedrick Wills, Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to OhioLottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
We continue talking Browns with Spencer German from 92.3 The Fan. Jedrick Wills talked about last year kind of fighting through injuries and what he learned from that, and as well as how he's feeling this year.
I feel a lot better. Last year was a struggle. It wasn't a secret. Everybody knew that. Playing through injuries is one of the hardest things you can do as a player. So I'm excited for this year.
Talking about that, Jed, you made a Pro Bowl, but do you feel like this is a big year for you to prove some things?
Yeah, definitely. It'd be a turnaround year for me.
Did that tough year result in the way you changed your offseason at all?
No, not at all. Just make sure I was healthy and continue training as usual.
Is it tough to have, though, your struggles kind of out in front of the world?
No, I mean, we play in front of millions of fans on TV, so there's no hiding it. I mean, I got hurt, and I continue to get hurt throughout the games that I was playing in, but I'm healthy now, and that's what matters. So
why did you play through that thing then if you're only 50%? I mean.
We had some troubles at my position. I wasn't the only person that was hurt, and there were some other guys that were behind me that were hurt as well. So if I was able to at least be out there, then put forth my effort and see what I could do. So.
And Spencer, again, it was pretty evident Jedrick Wills at times was playing on one leg. So he's a guy they need to be more like the guy 2 years ago, the guy that they liked the progress of when they saw him his rookie year, and even take a step forward. And if that happens, that line's going to be pretty good.
Yeah, I thought the answer to that last question was pretty telling, because I think we all kind of agree there was maybe not as much time given to him to heal up as maybe other players potentially could have had. But him kind of sharing that, there was other injuries behind me and I wasn't the only player who was injured, and that kind of forced his hand. And we know, like, generally these guys want to be out there if they can play, even if they're not 100%. I mean, we saw the same thing from Baker last year, right? So I certainly understand that mindset, but I think him not being able to heal up certainly played a role in how he performed last year. So, yeah, I think everyone's counting on he bounces back to the guy he was his rookie year. I think really people are expecting that almost too, because if he doesn't, then you start to have questions about that left tackle position, which we know how important that is, and the Browns maybe got to start looking elsewhere. So let's all hope that comes true. I think he certainly is up to the task. I'm not willing to rule a guy out after one solid, good year where he was a Pro Bowler and then a year where he obviously had a setback with the injury and struggled. So, yeah, year 3, big one for him. And I think he kind of knows going in like he's got to prove that he's more of the guy he was his rookie year than he was this past season.
All right, before let's go, 5 most overrated players on the Browns' 2022 roster, according to Dog Pound Daily. 5, they go Harrison Bryant. 4, Ronnie Harrison. 3, Jordan Elliott. 2, Jedrick Wills. And they say number 1, Donovan Peoples-Jones. And when you look at this, Spencer, these guys haven't really produced, but a lot of them haven't been given the opportunity. Peoples-Jones had that great camp, and then he kind of got shoved into the number 1 receiver spot by injury and Odell and Landry being injured. He's not a number 1 wide receiver. He may get there, but he's much more suited to be a complimentary kind of guy.
Yeah, and I can understand why he's the top of this list just based on last year alone, right? Like, we had a situation where he was and this goes back to what we talked about last segment, like he was so hyped up during training camp last year. Everybody was expecting just this explosive coming out party by him last year, and it just didn't happen. And obviously some of that was probably hindered by the quarterback play and Baker being injured. But yeah, I mean, he certainly had that aura about him where we thought we were going to get more than what we actually got. So I think there's still some hype about him this year. I think at least within Cleveland, fans have kind of tempered their expectations a little bit and said, let's just pump the brakes and see what he does, see how he fits in this offense. Hopefully that includes Deshaun Watson playing at some point this season. But yeah, I can understand why he's the top of the list. I actually think Harrison Bryant has some potential. He made some plays last year. He kind of became a nice red zone target for Baker. I think that could still stay true this year again, especially with Jacoby Brissett, guy who loves throwing to tight ends. So I think there's still some hope for him. And Jordan Elliott's another one I get. That just goes back to, again, the defensive tackle position has been a theme of the show today for us. A lot of guys are going to get a lot of reps. They're going to rotate in. Who's going to stand out? And I think he's a guy that we've been waiting now a couple years for him to kind of stand out and show himself as a better player than what we maybe think he is right now.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think Bryant, remember, he'll be tight end too, so he'll get more opportunities. Spencer German, 92.3 The Fan, as always. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Spencer.
Always a pleasure to be on, Dave. Appreciate you, man.
All right, Spencer German, make sure you listen to him, 92.3 The Fan. It's going to do it for this edition of Sports4CLE. We will see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow on Sports4CLE.